Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I add another page in my Wonder Book. And if you're new here, welcome. If you're wondering what a Wonder Book is, hang in there and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But before we get started, as I'm finishing up my washi tape, let's take a look at the supplies I'll be using. This is the Lamy All-Star Mechanical Pencil. And then I have the Mono Zero by Tombow. This is my favorite eraser that I've ever owned. I love that. And then finally from Prismacolor, and I believe this is their Premiere series, I have a 50% Cool Gray, and that's PC1063. Now for my Wonder Book, I am doing a picture that I didn't really wonder about. I was just kind of inspired by it because of another video that I watched earlier this week, and I wanted to know a little bit more and share with you what I found. So if you haven't taken a look at the cover photo, which you probably already have, I'm drawing a sheep. And to get started with the sheep, I'm just doing some basic landmarks on here. I'm not doing any hard outlines, no hard contour lines, just a few little areas that tell me, okay, this is the nose, and here's what I'm going to put an ear, and this is going to be the eye, and I'll do little scribbles here and there, basically just gesture drawings. I just want to know where I can come back in and put the colored pencil on top. So what I'm doing on this one, as I said, is a sheep, and I watched a video this past week, and I'm going to link that down below. It's from another YouTuber, and the name of his site is Expedition Bible. He is actually a biblical archaeologist. I was just going to say an archaeologist, but I think he's actually a biblical archaeologist. And if you're like me and you can hear something, somebody can tell you something, but you want to really dig into it and prove it to yourself to make sure what they're saying is true. I won't say that I have a trust issue with people, but I do like to look stuff up for myself. And when you're talking about Christianity, that is something that is so important. You don't need to take anyone's word for it. You need to go and look it up for yourself. You need to be certain for yourself. You don't need to listen to me or to anyone else. What I'm going to tell you on here are things that I've discovered when I wonder about things from the Bible. And I was actually, for this wonder journal entry, I was going to do wormwood because I don't know what wormwood is. And you see that in the Bible, I think it's 8 or 9 times, once in the New Testament, and then like 7 or 8 times in the Old Testament. So that's what this entry was going to be about. But I saw this video from Expedition Bible, and I'll link that down below along with his handle on here. So if you just want to go check out, if you like history and you like these informative documentaries, then you can go and check him out. His videos are never very long, not over 30 minutes, and they are absolutely so informative and so fabulous. But he, in his video, was talking about what a shepherd does. And he follows a group of Bedouins around, and he makes a video about that and how it relates to the Bible. And oh, by the way, I'm going to be using a kneaded eraser to remove any stray spots. And I'm going to start with the pencil now. And you can see it's not sharpened. So if you're one of my former students watching this, and you're like, oh, Miss Tanya, you always told us to sharpen our pencils. They had to be sharp. Yes, they do if you're working on just regular paper and it's a colored pencil piece, but I'm actually working on watercolor paper, and watercolor paper is really going to knock that tip down, and I'm not wanting to have any solid lines, and that's the key to this. You know, if you're here for the art, I'm going to be talking about the art. That's what my Wonder Book is. If you're here for information about the Bible, I'm going to be talking about that too, so just kind of hang in there. But on this, I don't want any sharp lines. So I don't want a sharp tip on that pencil. I want something dull. So basically at this step, what you're going to see me doing is blocking in all of the shapes. I just want a tonal drawing. This is going to give me a roadmap. If you haven't watched the other videos, I'm going to be using, only in this book, I use Derwent Graphitint, and this is in the pan. I use the little half pans. So I'm going to be using that on here, and that's going to do most of the work, but I want to get all the darks and lights down first, And since I didn't do a regular contour drawing, this is going to help me get that form in so that I can come back and put the Graphitint on top. So now that we have that out of the way, let's go back to why I chose the sheep. Throughout the Bible, you see reference to sheep. They were used in sacrifice. They were used in symbolism. You see a lot of information and a lot of talk about shepherds. When Jesus was born, the first people that were told were the Levitical priests who were out tending. They were being shepherds over the flock of sheep, which would be used for sacrifice. So you even go back as far in the Old Testament where David himself, King David, he was from a family of shepherds. He was a sheep herder. That's what he did. And he was the youngest of all of his brothers. And so he knows a little bit about being a shepherd. And that takes me to, I want to read you this. This is Psalm 23. And if you're familiar with the Psalms, then you know what this Psalm is. But even if you do, I'm going to read it anyway. And I will read a few verses here in this one, but not a lot, just a few, just to kind of show you where this all ties in and comes together. But before I read that, we are almost finished with all of the tonal work on this piece, and we're going to start adding the Graphitint. And here is the Derwent Graphitint. And yes, this is another day. If you watch my stuff before, you know I do this over multiple days. I'll sit down and work on things. So this is my Derwent Graphitint. And this is the one we're going to be using, Graphite Gray. That's the only one in this set we're going to be using because it is a tonal piece. And here are my brushes. I have the Winsor & Newton. That's a size 6 round from the Cotman series and a size 3 round from that same series from Winsor & Newton. And then I have from Royal & Langnickel a size 8 round from their Zen series, water, and then of course a cloth. And mine's microfiber, but it can be anything. I'm putting some water in the palette there and then transferring that graphite gray over because it just makes transfer a little bit easier and keeps me from wasting any product. Now, the one thing I will tell you on this, there is no black in the Graphitint. I mean, it's graphite and it looks like graphite when you put it on. It's like liquid graphite that I'm painting with here. And I'm not going to be able to get super dark values. So my basic step here, this first step is going to be me just going over everything that I already have pencil down on, not worried if it's smoothed out because honestly you're not going to be able to worry about that when you're working with this Graphitint. It's going to be a little spotty. That's just the nature of it. And you'll notice when I go back over to the palette there, now I will eventually work straight in the well, but when I'm working from the palette, I will swirl it a little bit. And that's to keep all of those little pigments, those little graphite pigments kind of distributed evenly. Otherwise it gets a little spotty in places. So I've just kind of made that a habit, but I'm going to go ahead and it's almost like giving it a wash here. I have to be careful how much I'm putting on my brush because I don't want to cover the whole thing because as you're going to see when we go along here, all of that colored pencil I put down really is just a roadmap. It's going to disappear underneath this Graphitint. So I want to get a good wash on everything, but not covering up all of the white areas, like right on the top of the head there, like the forehead up above that, and then the top of the nose coming down. That was white, and I wanted to keep that a little bit lighter, so you're not going to see any color on that. And then I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and go through the whole process again. But I want to wait and let this dry, and right now I am using the Royal & Langnickel size 8 from that Zen series because it holds much more water than the Winsor & Newton brushes from the Cotman series do. And I want this to be more like a wash. So I want to keep it light. I want to make sure I have a lot of water in my brush, not too much. If you've never worked with these Graphitint, they can be a little bit tricky, but once you've worked with them, you'll get the hang of it. You'll get the hang of it. So we're going to go in a little more detail. And this is the size 3. That was a little close to the camera. Sorry about that. This is the size 3. And because I want this to be darker, I'm not painting from the palette. I'm painting straight from the pan. So my brush has very little water on it. I want more color. I'm not going to be able to get anything really, really dark. It's going to be tonal. So I have to be careful not to get it too watered down in this area. Plus, once I get the color on, I'm going to let it dry. You can get it darker by adding successive layers, but you have to let it dry. If you don't, your paintbrush with the water is going to work just like an eraser, and it's going to pull all of that color right back up off of your paper. So that's just, again, just the nature of it. But once you start working with it, you'll get the hang of it. It's really easy to get the hang of. And I absolutely love it. I don't want to say I love it more than watercolor, but I think sometimes, yes, I do, especially for certain situations. I really like the effect that it gives. So let's go back. We were talking about Psalm 23, and this is Psalm 23, 1 through 6. And it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." So as I said earlier, David was a shepherd. He knows a little bit about what a shepherd does, and he talks about that in Psalm 23. And he compares the Lord to a shepherd because the Lord takes care of him and he leads him just like a shepherd would lead his sheep. And as I said, Jesus even calls himself the Good Shepherd. But one thing in this Psalm 23 that to me, it really spoke to me when I realized what was going on in the Old Testament, and then I took a look at it again in the New Testament through different eyes, through the eyes of Psalm 23, I realized there's a link here. And I have never heard anyone say this is like one of the prophecies, but it does kind of foreshadow what's going to happen in the New Testament, because it says, when I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, and thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The shadow of death, the valley of the shadow of death, that's a real place. And it's called the Kidron Valley. And the Kidron Valley is located between Jerusalem on one side. It goes down the Kidron Valley, and then it goes up to the Mount of Olives. And some of these, if you know the story of what happens to Jesus over in the New Testament, those are locations that are very familiar. Now, David, when he wrote this, he traveled through the valley of the shadow of death. And the reason David was there was because his son Absalom decided he wanted to be king and he was going to overthrow his father. So David was fleeing with his people by way of the valley of the shadow of death through Kidron Valley. And that's how David referred to it, was the valley of the shadow of death, which I think it can also be translated the valley of the shadow of darkness. So here goes David, fleeing from Absalom, and the Lord is leading him, and he's not afraid because he knows it's going to be okay. Now, fast forward hundreds of years later, when Jesus has been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, and guess where they led him? They led him straight down the valley of the shadow of death, that Kidron Valley, straight to Jerusalem where he would stand trial. I wanted to take a little break from the story at this point and come back to the art. Now, through the magic of YouTube, you're not watching paint dry with me. This has already dried. So you see me coming back and painting on this ear, and it's getting a little bit darker. So I can build this up to a certain point, but it's still going to be like a dark, dark gray. I just have to be very careful about where I want to put the darks. I don't want everything dark. I don't want everything medium. I want 3 shades here. I want light, medium, and dark. And you see that can get super dark. Again, I'm using that Winsor & Newton brush, not holding a lot of water, and it's allowing me to come in and to get those darker tones. Also notice that sometimes I'm using back and forth motions to kind of spread things out like that. And then other times I'm going to be dabbing. When I dab, that allows me to get a little bit darker in an area. And sometimes when you're dragging the brush back and forth like you would normally paint, like that, it will actually pick up some of the pigment that's on there. And so when you tap it, you can kind of put that, see, it picked it up right there. You can kind of put that right back down on the paper. I'm not worried about this being smooth. I believe I said that at the beginning. I'm not going to be able to make it smooth, and that's okay. That's not the nature of this piece. I wanted it to be a little rough anyway, so this medium works perfectly for that. But that's my process. I'm going to keep adding the darks and the mediums, and then the areas I want to be light, I'm just not going to touch those at all. I just wanted to read you one prophecy about Jesus from Isaiah that does refer to him as being like a shepherd. And this comes from Isaiah 40, 10 through 11. And it says, "Behold, the Lord God shall come with a strong hand, and his arm shall rule for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. He will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom, and gently lead those who are with young." So you see right there where Isaiah is relating him to a shepherd. And again, Jesus is going to call himself the Good Shepherd. But what amazes me is that this was written 800 years before his birth. This was foretold. And for me, that's a proof. I see where there's evidence that it was written. It can be dated. And then there's historical evidence. I'm not just talking the Bible. There are actual non-biblical historical documents that document Jesus being here on earth. And I just think that's pretty cool. So let's go over to John 10. This is chapter 10, verses 7 through 9. And let's see what Jesus has to say about himself. Then Jesus said to them again, "Most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture." And again, at this point, I have to say, you really need to go down to my description and click on the link and watch the video that I watched on Expedition Bible, because he explains this beautifully. It's a beautiful film. It doesn't take too long to watch. It's excellent. You need to go watch it. But again, I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm going to let him do that. But you need to go and watch that. And then finally, again, in John 10, verse 11 and then 14 through 16, this is what Jesus has to say. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep and am known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. So when he's talking about his sheep, those are the Jewish people. Those are the chosen ones of God. That is God's people, Israel. And when he says, and the other sheep I have which are not of this fold, if you are not Jewish, my friend, that's you and me. So that's who he's talking about. He is bringing us all together because he is the shepherd and we are the sheep. So, and that is why I chose to do a sheep. Watch that Expedition Bible video and it inspired me. And the more I looked at Psalm 23, I realized, that's the Kidron Valley. And that's the same valley David fled down away from Jerusalem, and Jesus used it to come to Jerusalem. So I thought it was really neat. And if you have any questions about any of this, please put those down below. I'll put other links for you that are Bible links. I'll have links for all of my supplies, all the links down in the description. They will all be there. Now, at this point, I am trying to get in a little more detail with this piece. So I'm using that small brush. I want it to be the light gray and not the dark gray. Remember, we're trying to be very selective about where we put the darks, but I needed more gray. So I'm going to be skipping around on here in different areas, and I'm going to be looking for where the dark needs to be, the super dark, and that's what I'm doing here. If you put on an area of dark, and you need it not to be like a juxtapositioned piece, you need it to kind of blend out, go ahead and put it on. Then wipe your brush and get most of it off. Go right at the edge where you want it to blend in, and then you can just bring it straight down. Because if you don't have any water or color on your brush, if it's just slightly damp, it's not dry completely on the paper, then you're going to be able to just move that around and not take up any other color. So what I'm going to do right now is hop off and give my voice a little bit of a rest and let you watch me work, and I'll hop back on again in a minute and we'll talk some more. noticed right at that spot that my book moved slightly. That's because there was some drying time in there. I'm to the very last layers, and I want this to be super dark because the sheep that I chose for this, and I'm going to put that link down below as well. My reference for this came from a site called Unsplash, and Unsplash is basically a group of photographers that allow you to use their photography skills for your work, however you're going to use it, but to give them credit. So that photographer's name will be down below, along with a link where you can find this picture if you want to try it for yourself. But I loved the way this sheep just came straight out of the shadows. And I knew I had to get this side that I'm working on much, much darker. So I needed to let that dry completely, and I didn't use any kind of heat gun on this. I don't know if I said that earlier. When I said I was watching paint dry, I literally mean I was watching paint dry. You can use a hair dryer or whatever on this, but honestly, it was in the next room, and I was enjoying the window being open and the sunshine and the nice warm air coming in. So I just didn't do it. I just let it dry by itself. So once it was dry, and I touched it to make sure it was dry because that lower left-hand corner had quite a bit of water on it, and I needed to let that dry. And you can see I'm going back and forth here on the face of the sheep because I would fix one side and then I feel like the other side needed a little bit more on it. You know, it wasn't quite the right shape, even though I know it's not going to be even on both sides, and there were shadows. I was still trying to make it my own sheep here, so that's what you're seeing. Also, I did not explain at the very beginning about the washi tape around there. The reason I use washi tape is because I could never think to put another piece of paper between the one I'm working on and the one underneath, so I don't paint on them. So I decided I'm just going to put washi tape on here. So it serves absolutely no purpose other than it keeps me from painting on the sheets below. And it does reduce my paintable area, but that's okay. So I'm being very careful on this eye because, like I said, the whole side of the face, this whole side of the sheep is back in the shadows. And I'm having to use a lot of dabbing motions like you're seeing now in order to get the texture on the sheep itself, but also to kind of get more of a dark in the background. And you're really going to see that when I work around the sheep's face on that side. So that's where we're at on this part. just a few more comments as we're coming to the end of the video, about to say goodbye. If you are going to work with Graphitint, keep in mind when you put it down on the paper, it's going to be darker than when it actually dries. It'll be much lighter when it dries. So you can see where I'm putting it down now, it's super dark. I wish it had stayed this dark when I was painting with it, but it's always going to dry lighter. So keep that in mind. Again, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but if you pick up Graphitint, I don't think you'll be disappointed. And I'm not sponsored by them, but hey, Derwent, if you're out there, I'm not sponsored by them, but I do love their product. And as far as the picture, I chose this because I love the way the sheep is coming out of the darkness, and I thought that fit very well with the valley of the shadow of death, or the valley of the shadow of darkness. And it's a sheep and a shepherd, and I think you see where I was going on that. And if this was your first time, thank you for stopping by. I hope that you will join us. I hope you'll subscribe. And if you're watching this, whether you're new or you've been here before, thank you. And if any of this spoke to you, please share this video. And the video that I have linked below, Expedition Bible, please share that one with people as well. I talked about always look stuff up for yourself. Never take my word for it. The truth is, I look stuff up because it interests me, not because I doubt anything, because I've been a believer for, oh my goodness, let me think, probably since I was about 9 or 10 years old, I became a Christian. And it was a very private thing for me. It was something I did all on my own. And, if you have any questions, seek out someone that can help you with that. Ask me a question if you want to. If I can't help you, I will lead you somewhere where someone can help you. But do share this if it spoke to you. If you have something that you wonder about, put that down below, because maybe I'll wonder about it too, and I'll want to do a journal entry about it. But I am happy to be on here sharing my art with you, sharing my faith with you. I'm so happy you were here. I'm always so thankful when you guys stop by. I'll be doing some more of these. Like I said, I'm going to do one on wormwood, because I didn't realize that we have wormwood here. I didn't even know what it was, but when I looked it up, I was showing my daughter and my husband, and they were like, I've seen that before in the yard. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't realize we had wormwood here, but now I know what wormwood is. So we'll learn about that the next time I do one of these, and I'll have some more of these. Plus I'm going to be doing, I keep saying we're going to do gouache. I'm going to have some more gouache, and I have some other projects coming up. I'll hope you will join me for all of those. But until then, my friends, I will see you in the next one.